Hello, welcome to episode 34 of Knitter Matters. Thank you very much for joining us today, whether you're watching us live or watching the replay later. I really appreciate you joining us. Welcome to Knitter Matters. I'm Cheryl Lampard, I'm an image consultant. My company is Style Matters International, and for as long as I can remember, my two passions in life have been sewing and knitting in particular I've found incredibly therapeutic and relaxing. I think we all need that at the moment. I also used to own a wonderful yarn store in Brighton, England, and one of the great joys of owning a yarn store is that you get to teach people how to knit. And all these years later I'm doing it again, albeit on a different platform, but it's just as much a joy to me now as it was then. Feel free as we go along to put any comments or questions in the thread below. I can't actually see what you're writing while I'm doing the Facebook Live, but I'll respond to you as soon as possible afterwards. If you pop up, if you say hi to me on Facebook, I'll do my best to actually say hello. Joyce, Joyce Rasmussen, thank you. I can see that you have joined us. Thank you. It's great to be able to say hi to you as we go along. But do put any questions, anything about knitting or Knitter Matters, and feel free to do that during the week. That's what the page is there for. Now, today we're going to do the final part of the Carefree Cardigan by Mary Maxim, and it's all about the finishing. Just before we get on to that, I chose the project because it was actually the first garment that we've made in Knitter Matters. We did a neck cowl, we did an afghan, we did a Leoc shrug, but this is a garment. You've got more to deal with. You've got sleeves, you've got a bigger piece to be working on. So I thought it was a great project for beginners, yet there was enough in the stitch pattern to keep intermediate knitters busy with it. And of course you end up with a garment, which is always great. Just to tell you, the kit is $24.99 from Mary Maxim, but have a look at their website anyway, whether you choose to buy that kit or anything else. I've got to lift this up so the camera can see it. Don't forget that you get a 20% discount off the highest price item in your cart, whether it's this kit or anything else that you choose to buy. Put in the promo code Cheryl and then you'll get your 20% discount. And that's from anywhere in the world. They ship worldwide. So, but you must put the promo code in Cheryl to get your discount. Okay, so before we get on with finishing the Carefree Cardi, when we did part 2 last week, I also, as part the second part of Facebook Live last week was about fibre facts, and I got some feedback saying that you found it really interesting, but could we do something that actually showed samples knitted up to see how the knitted fibres are? And I thought that was a fantastic idea. So what I'll be doing in future, I will be, in a future episode, I'll be doing a whole episode on fibres, and I'll have knitted samples so that you can see how the different fabrics knit up, how they're blocked, and you know how they behave. So it's thanks to your feedback that you give me these great ideas. Sometimes I think, well, let me put this into an episode, and then I realise it's actually a lot of information, and it was rather a lot last week. So I really appreciate you telling me things like that. It's only by knowing what you think that we get better each week. So I'm going to ask the camera now to turn to the worktop, and we're going to get started on finishing the Carefree Cardi. So if you haven't done this Carefree Cardi, it actually doesn't matter. The techniques that we're doing and what we've done are useful for to transfer to any project. So, but if you have done it, you end up with a garment. Now, finishing, as far as this garment is concerned, means sewing up the shoulder, side and sleeve seams and setting in the sleeves. And I thought long and hard about the best way to demonstrate. This is quite a big piece, so just bear with us. The camera has to adjust to this a bit. I'm going to be moving that about again in a minute. So we'll focus on the bits that we're working on, okay? And I'll try not to move it around too much to stop too much camera frenzy going on. So I thought long and hard about the best way to demo today's technique, because it is a lot of garment to maneuver in a small area. And I decided that the easiest way was to work on one half of the garment and actually one half of the sleeve. And I'll show you why that all is as we go along. So first off, I want to show you the shoulder seam. I've done the shoulder seam here in the way that I always do it, which is sewing from the right side of the fabric. Now if I get my little pointer, you can, this is the seam. The seam here, we're working on the right front. I've done the back and the right front and one sleeve here. So putting the right front in, when you actually knit this item, when you finish off the last row for the back, it tells you quite clearly, or the last few rows, it tells quite clearly where you mark the, where your neck edge has to go to join the back neck. So you'll know that that's 20, that it'll be 23 stitches this way and 23 stitches for the front too. Now, you could actually, there's several ways. Oh, I just realized I have my watch on and I like to keep that there so that I can see what time we're doing. Okay, so there are various ways to sew up your shoulder seam, and we covered seaming in some detail in episode 27, in the Seams Easy episode 27. So if you need a full refresher, please go to that episode. Oh, Anne Lewis, you've just popped up. Hi, how are you? So nice to see you join us. Thank you. Now, one of the shoulder seams, and the shoulder seam on this garment in particular, because it's a big garment, it's not a hefty garment, but it's a longish garment, it's got long sleeves. You don't have any pick up round the neck edging, so all of the weight hangs from the shoulders. So you want a firm seam here. You don't want anything that's too sloppy. And again, because you're not picking up to do a finishing edge. You know, the stitch pattern that you've done is the finishing edge, so you're not doing an additional band or anything like that, so you haven't got any extra support there. So you really need this shoulder seam to be firm, not too stretchy, because otherwise if the shoulder's slack, it's going to distort the neckline as well, and it's going to sort of pull off the shoulders, which you don't want. Now, one of the seams that we did do in episode 27 was a 3 needle bind off, which is essentially, Christy Scruggs, thank you for joining us. Welcome. We did a 3 needle bind off. I'm not going to demonstrate that today, but this, I wouldn't do that particular bind off. It's a nice bind off. You actually you keep the live stitches on both needles and you cast them off as you knit. You know, as you knit that last cast off row, you cast them off as you cast off. Of course you do. What I'm saying is you combine all the live stitches in a cast off, so you're seaming and casting off at the same time, and you do get a really nice seam, and it looks lovely on the right side, but it's really a bit too stretchy. I would do that for a lighter weight garment or a summer top or something, but anything that's got too much weight, it's actually not quite firm enough, I find. So that's not one I would do. The one that I would do is the seam that we did in our Afghan, when we made the Afghan and joined the 2 horizontals. You do it from the right side, and you're stitching one side. You're taking a stitch from here, and so on and so on. Again, that's all in episode 37, but on the wrong side, you'll see it like this. It's a really nice seam, but it's quite firm. You've got a little bit of give in this because the pattern is stretchy, but it's a nice firm seam. You end up almost, you can see it just there. It's sort of like a back stitch as you go along. Okay, but it's a good seam for a shoulder seam. So that's in episode 37 if you need a refresher on that. Okay, now I showed you the shape of the sleeve cap last week. I'm going to just bring things onto the garment so that I don't have to keep moving it around. Our sleeve cap is quite steep. So our sleeve cap, this is not the schematic for this garment, it's just a general one. Oh, hi Sheila. Sheila Shepley has joined us. Thank you for joining, Sheila. So our sleeve cap is much more like this, much steeper. Oh, terrible drawing, Cheryl. But you can see the idea. It goes much more like this. And dressmakers, if there's any dressmakers out there, this is a very familiar shape for you. So we have this amount of fabric to get in to our armhole. Okay, Okay, so our sleeve cap, this is the sleeve cap, that's what we refer to, this shaped part. Okay, ours is like that, and our armhole is shaped more like that. Okay, so that's a curved part here, then it goes straighter, and we've got to get this all in. If you're doing a drop sleeve garment, which this is here, it's kind of easier because you've got a straight flat seam and you've got a straight flat seam to deal with there. We've got curves to deal with. If this was a drop shoulder garment, I would be doing it flat on my worktop. But because this is a curve and this is a curve too, I'm going to be actually working on a tailor's ham, just because I prefer to do that. And let me show you. Let me show you why. This is a tailor's ham. If you don't have one, it doesn't matter at all. If I'm going to show you how I work on this to set in the sleeve, because it's going to be a lot easier for you to see, and it's actually easier for me to work with because we're setting in a rounded sleeve cap into a curved armhole. If you don't have one, then don't worry about it. You can always make a similar thing out of a hand towel or a pad. It doesn't have to be as steep as this either. Mine's perfect for showing you what I'm doing, but the reason I suggest working on something that has got a bit of a curve is because we're working from the right side of the garment. We're putting curves in to the sleeve. We don't want to lose that. And if you do it flat, you're kind of going to lose that. Have a look on the Mary Maxim site. See if they have tailor's hams. You might be able to get one from there or something similar. But it's nothing to worry about if you don't have one. But I'm just going to maneuver this about a bit to get this in the right place. And then I'm going to show you. So what I've done here, sorry, if the camera just keeps still and I'll move round. So I said to you, I've done one half of the sleeve, which I have. This is the back. This is one sleeve. This is the right sleeve. And I've inserted this up to the point. There's my little pointer. So my seam has gone from the underarm there. That's the back. This is the sleeve. Now notice I haven't seamed the sleeve yet. Okay. I've stitched that in. I've gone to the top point of which matches the shoulder seam. So I've done that on the back. And I've maintained sort of the curve of that. But I'm going to show you now on the front. I felt it was actually too big a piece to show you both halves at the same time. So, and I'm going to have to kind of move myself around. So, when you first look at this, you think, oh my goodness, because of that sleeve cap, that's a lot of fabric to try and get in. There's more fabric there than will fit the armhole. Well, there sort of is and there isn't. And for any dressmakers out there, you'll know that this is the part where the sleeve is eased in, because we're stitching essentially. There's a bit of curve there, then we go into a straight part, and then we've got this to get in here, and it looks like it doesn't fit. Well, that might be a possibility, and we'll talk about that towards the end. But assuming that you've done it to gauge and you've done the right amount of measurements and stitches for your design, let's assume that this is going to fit. But it still looks like there's a lot. But here's the thing. When you're working with a woven fabric, and the sleeve is often shaped very similar to this, you ease this part of the fabric into to the top part of the armhole. You ease the sleeve cap in. And why do you do that? Well, if you think about it, the way the shoulder is shaped, and when you've got a set-in sleeve, which is meant to sit on the shoulder bone, and if when we pan out later you look back at Mabel, you'll see that the sample garment there is sitting exactly on the shoulder bone of Mabel, if she had a shoulder bone, but you know what I'm saying. And then the arm doesn't come flat down. There's always a little curve at the top of the arm, so you don't want to lose that. And if you end up with a sleeve where it's smaller than the armhole, what happens is when you stitch it in, it kind of retreats into the armhole. It kind of withdraws into it, and it doesn't look good. So you're better off if you've got a bit of excess fabric to work in than not. But we'll address some of those issues at the end if it's too big or too small. So what I did to make life easier for myself, and I recommend you do this anyway whenever you're setting in a sleeve, and certainly when it's a cap sleeve, and I'm referring now to my weird little sleeve. Peggy Ann Bent, you've joined us. Thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to see you on. So this is my weird little sleeve thingy. So what I did here, I just folded that in half and I tagged it with some spare yarn. And then I sort of tagged my half point from where that's going to join the shoulder and from the armhole. And what I did there, so you think, well, how do I find the halfway point? Well, what I did essentially, and I did this when it was flat, so forgive me now. So I just kind of followed the tape measure along the curve to see how long it was. So that half from the top where that's going to join the shoulder is, it was measuring kind of 12 inches there. It's only a rough measure, 12 inches there. Then I would find my halfway point on my armhole, okay? So I tagged the armhole and I tagged that. That helps me. That's a bit of a guide. So with my weird little sleeve there, that's essentially what I did there. And to do that, as I say, you just fold it in half and then kind of either, yeah, it's a bit hard to fold that in half again, but I would measure that very loosely with the edge of a tape measure. So now that I know where my sort of, they're not, you know, my notches, if you were, are, I can start working on it. So I'm going to use some bamboo pins here just to see where I'm going. What I did do here was just start this seam off. This is the back, this is the side. This is the sleeve. What am I talking about? This is the sleeve here on this side. This is the side front. And I've just started that off so it's not all flapping about while I'm demonstrating. So what you can do, I like these bamboo pins. These are really handy things for knitting or for stitching on things. So remember, I'm working from the right side, and I like to do that when I'm sewing up knitted garments because you can actually see where your stitches are going. You can see if you've made an error, and it's easy to unpick just a few stitches if you need to. So I'm just going to kind of pin that there, just hold that there, and it's above this point that I'm going to have to ease that in. So here I know it's all pretty good. I do want to match this initial few cast off stitches here in the pattern. I think I cast off 8 stitches, depends what size you're doing. So that would be 8 on the side front and 8 on the sleeve. So I want to make sure that that is matched. Then that looks pretty good to me. There. Now, this is the trickier bit. So I'm thinking, Deborah Hagman, thank you for joining us. Thanks very much. So now I'm thinking I've got to get this in. Well, I'm not going to fret about it because I know it's going to work its way in. But as long as I have the top point, this is where I'm going to do the easing, not down here. And don't forget, you're working with 2 slightly different fabrics. This is curved here. This is now straight. This is a straight line. This is all straight knitting. This is curved. So, of course, it's going to be a bit of manoeuvring that you're going to have to do. But, you know, I'm just fine with that. I can put a pin in there if I want to. I can put as many as I want. But I would recommend, before you actually start sewing your sleeve, that you just sort of hold that in to see how much excess you've got to do. Okay? And you would do that. I've already done this part of my sleeve. I told you that. But what I would do is work both at the same time. So I would go with this side first, and I would stitch. I would get from the, you know, this is under the arm, essentially, that seam. I would stitch up so far on this side, then I would do the same here, and I would sort of stitch up to probably where my tags are there. Because then I know my sleeve cap, all of that's got to be worked in. What you don't want to do is do a single seam from here all the way up and then all the way down. Because you're easing, you want to ease that fullness in that way. So I still have some thread here. So I'm going to show you now. I'll get my bodkin. I like these yarn stitching up needles that have got this little curved tip at the end. It really makes it easy to work with. Doesn't matter if you don't have one of those, but I really like those. Let's get my yarn threaded. Then I've got to just finagle myself around a bit here. So remember, so I'm picking a stitch from either side, and because I've got a few stitches here that need to match, this is my bit of stockinette stitch before I started my pattern. I'm picking up there, and I'm picking up there again. Don't forget, if you want a closer look at how I was doing this, go to episode 37, which we called Seams Easy. If you think it's a bit weird sewing up from the right side, once you do it, you'll wonder how you ever sewed up a knitted garment from the wrong side after that. So I've just stitched up that little bit there of stockinette stitch, which is on the side front and on my sleeve. Now I'm going to go into the main body, but I'm still going to work in the same way. I'm picking up, let's go with that one. I'm picking up one to the other. Now I won't be able to match patterns here because it's a slightly different stitch pattern that I'm working with. I've got my garter check pattern here, and this goes into the seeded rib stitch. So I can't possibly expect to match stitch by stitch there. And as I said before, we have a curved fabric and a straighter fabric. But don't you just love the fact that you can see what you're doing? And if you find that, it's not going so well, or it's so easy then to just try and unpick a few stitches. And I keep them loose for a few stitches, then I tighten it up. It's always that tricky bit from the shaping until you, when you do that first cast off for the sleeve and armhole shaping, you tend to get a gap. Now here I'm sort of stitching, we're going into that funny curve now. So you just find your way around it, and if you don't like what you've done, it's super easy to unpick it. And one of the blessings of this rag yarn is that I almost defy you to sort of see any mistakes after you've done it. So I'm going up now. This bit's going to be under the arm anyway. Take those out as I go along. Now we're getting a bit straighter here, so life gets a bit easier. And I'm not going right on the edge. I'm going to stitch in. This is my edge stitch, if you will. I'm going to stitch in. We keep going up. How are we doing for time? Okay. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to get there. I'm going to just shoot ahead here. So I'm going to whiz ahead. It might not be perfect at this point, but I want to get to how we do the sleeve head. So I'm just going to gamble along here. And I would leave these, your little tags that you've done, and leave those in till afterwards in case you need to unpick a little bit of your stitching so that you know where they are. So can you see why it's actually quite easy on a tailor's ham? But again, don't worry if you haven't got one. You can always kind of curve it on your hand, or just have a little pad or something. It gets lost beautifully. This is a really good project to start off on because it's very forgiving if your stitching is a bit uneven or not quite perfect. Sorry, I knocked the microphone then. Right. Just want to rush up to, this is going to be, I'd have to unpick this again in a minute because I'm taking quite big stitches, but I need to get up. I want to get up to where we start kind of working in. Okay. Oh, get those out of the way. But I'm not going to take those out yet. I might need them. So now I'm at the point where I need to work some extra fabric in. Hi, Sue Osborne. Thank you for joining us. That's great. So now I've just got to you know, I've got a slightly square corner there. Don't worry about it. It's knitted fabric. You can kind of smoosh that in. So I'm going to sort of almost take a slightly bigger stitch there. Oh, I've got that. Wouldn't you know, if I wanted to catch that red tag in, I wouldn't. Right, okay. So remember, this is curved. It's working it into a straight area. So to ease it in, I'm almost taking slightly, I'm not really gathering it, but I'm sort of taking a slightly larger amount than I'm taking on this side. So I'm almost sort of gathering it in as I go in a very gentle way. So I might be just going up 1/8 of an inch there, where I'm taking in, you know, 1/4 an inch there, sort of thing, as you go along. So if you were a dressmaker, you'd be maybe gathering that bit in with some running stitches, feeding that in. So you can see, there we go. Once we get to this point, we've got a nice, and I'm doing this quickly. You'll do it a bit better than me. But again, the joy is if I'm doing it badly, or I've taken a bit too much, I can, super easy just to unpick a few stitches. Let's go, pull that in there. So you can work on the curve of your hand, you can work on a tailor's hammer or anything similar. So you see how nicely using this, it's easier for you to see while I'm working on the ham. But you're working on a curved part of the fabric. You want to maintain that curve. There we go. Now, if you get to this point or at the pinning point and you think, wow, there's much too much fabric to go in, that's never going to go, you could always, nobody wants to do this, but you could always just go back to the sleeve head, unravel that bind off row, pull out a few rows, and then adjust the height of your, I am going to take that out now, and you could adjust the height of your, there we go, I'll take that to the back now, I'll finish that off in a minute. So you could adjust the height of your sleeve cap, okay? So let's have a look. Let's see how we can best show you that. Okay, let me hold that over the sleeve cap. That's the sleeve head. If that was somebody's shoulder, and again, you know, you might have to just unpick a few. But can you, that's a bit lumpy there. I need to unpick that and just ease that in a bit better. But I said to you, I was rushing like mad to finish that. But you can see you're maintaining that nice curve of the shoulder. Yeah, I just need to deal with that bit again. But that's easy. That's easy. But the rest of it is fitting in really nicely. And if I show you the back, which I obviously took much more time over, but that's the principle of doing it. And everybody gets flustered about a sleeve cut. You see, that's so much nicer. I took more time over that. So much nicer. Okay, fits in really nice. But you're still maintaining that curve of the arm. If you find that your sleeve head is too small, you're going to have to, again, unpick the bound off edge and alter the height, bring it up a bit. So before I sign off, I just want to go to, if you can deal with a sleeve cap, a set-in sleeve, you can deal with practically anything else. It's the thing that gets everybody into a loop. But it's really not that tricky, okay? And this is almost quite tricky because you're dealing with two kind of stitch patterns. Now, what I did here, so the next thing I would do, once I've got my sleeve in the way I want it to be, I would then sew up my sleeve seam. Again, I do it from the right side. Okay, camera can't see, so I'm going to just, sorry, it's a big piece that I've got to maneuver. I started stitching this up. Can you see? Yeah. So what you would do is, once you have done your sleeve, you would sew up your sleeve seam and your side seam. Doesn't really matter which order you do that. I would probably do the sleeve seam first, but I started at the bottom here on my side seam because I just wanted to show you one last thing. I'm not going to demonstrate the stitch, you know how to do it by now. But on this Carefree Cardi, depending on the size that you did, all this sort of garter stitch check is across the back. And depending on the size you did, you've either got 2 stitches or 4 or 6, I think, on the back. Oh no, it's just 2 on the back, I think. But on the front, depending on the size that you've got, when you've done your check pattern, you've got anything from 2 to 6 stitches of stockinette stitch. And you've just got a couple of stockinette stitches here. So the reason I'm showing you that is because when you first lay it out, you do want to do this flat. This is a straight flat seam, so you can certainly work flat on that. Again, work from the right side, but if you're kind of matching that up, you might think, whoa, well, hang on, this is much floppier than this. Well, yes, it is, because you've got the fact that you're doing knit and purl, it's like a sort of checkerboard. It actually makes it a firmer fabric, as indeed it is there. But on this part, it's just it's stockinette, so it's a little bit looser. So this is definitely where you want to get your pins or something to just hold it as you stitch it. And what I did was I sort of just eyeballed where this garter check pattern is. So I know you can put little tags along if you really want to, or stitch markers, but if I know that bit of knit stitch there matches up with that one, I'm good. So, you know, just eyeball that as you go along. So I would then just kind of put my bamboo pin in there, and then I go up a bit further and, you know, try and just line up. Okay, try and line up another, so that would line up there. Yeah, that's a bit of, and just obviously I edge to edge just to hold the fabric. And again, because I sewed that from the right side, I did exactly what I was doing just now. I'm going in that first, you know, my edge stitch, the edge stitched here, and as you seam up, it really is seamless. That just disappears into the fabric. Your seam just disappears into the fabric. Okay. Yes, what did I want to say there? There was something I was going to say there about the seaming. Some patterns tell you, yes, some patterns do tell you to sew the seams up, to sew the side seam, to sew the sleeve seam, and then set in the sleeve. You can certainly do that, and that your pattern might require you to do that. I did it my way because I think it's just easier to see what's happening with your sleeve. But try both ways. There's no reason that you can't do it this way. I like doing it this way. Oh, Jackie Dumont, Michelle, thank you for joining us. So there's no reason that you can't do it that way. I just think it's a lot easier if you can to sort of open up your sleeve a bit and see where it's going. But always, again, always stitch from the right side, or where possible stitch from the right side, because it's so much easier to see where your knitting is going. So I'm going to just ask the camera to come back to me as we sign off. I hope you found that helpful. I hope you found, you've realised that setting in a sleeve just isn't as onerous as you might think it is. And take your time with it. Take your time with it, you know, stitch by stitch. And doing it on the right side, you can see so quickly if you've gone wrong or if you just need to unpick a few stitches. So it's just so much easier doing it on the right side. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it helpful. And show me your pictures. If you did do the Carefree Cardi, post your pictures during the week on Knit and Matter's Facebook page. I'd love to see them. Or if you've got any questions about it, don't hesitate to ask me. So as always, this episode and all other episodes of Knit and Matters are uploaded on our Facebook page under videos, and also our YouTube channel of the same name, Knit and Matters. We're on Instagram as well, so follow us, share us, like us, share us to other knitter friends that you may have. We're here to help So keep asking those questions, keep giving me your feedback. It's only by getting your feedback that I get better at doing this for you, and then I know what you want. So until this time next week, stay well, stay safe, stay calm, and stay knitting. See you next week. Bye bye for now.